As the story of Martin Luther King Jr. illustrates, neither the person nor the situation alone determine social behavior. Instead, the person and the situation work together in interesting and sometimes really complex ways to influence how people interact with their social world. So to understand social behavior, we must understand three things. One, the person. Two, the situation. And three, the person-situation interactions. So let's start by looking at the person. We want to understand the following distinctions: motives versus goals. So we'll also be looking at like automatic versus conscious goal pursuits, exemplars versus schemas. Some other keywords are priming versus chronic accessibility, self-concept versus self-esteem. The social individual is a dynamic combination of motivations, knowledge, and feelings, all of which work together to produce a wide range of social thought and social behavior. Motivation is the energy or driving force that moves people toward their goals. To understand what motivates someone, we must understand his or her goals, or what he or she's attempting to accomplish. Specific goals prompt us to pay attention to some things and not others, because attention is a limited resource. We can only pay attention to a small number of stimuli at a time. Goals help us to focus our attention on what might be the stimuli most relevant to accomplishing our goals. Achieving goals requires sub-goals or steps towards a larger goal. Motives are goals with a broad scope. Achieving goals requires considerable attention. The process of consciously focusing on aspects of our environment or ourselves, moving towards desired goals, can be difficult, as other goals may arise and then compete for our limited attention and resources. The term automaticity refers to the ability of a behavior or thought process to operate without conscious guidance once it's put into motion, so it's automatic. Another thing that we do is thought suppression. It's difficult to resist doing something. The more we try to repress certain thoughts, for example, the more they may come into our mind. The more energy a dieter expends trying to banish thoughts of food, the more those thoughts creep into the consciousness. So when we look at our view of the world, knowledge reflects our life experiences. These experiences shape our beliefs about people and our situations, for like why people, groups, or situations are the way they are. Research shows that knowledge is organized according to exemplars and schemas. An exemplar is, quote, a mental representation of a specific episode, event, or individual. Schemas are more general mental representations that capture the general characteristics of a particular class of episodes, events, or individuals. Okay, so a schema is like a building block, a structure to organize our ideas about something. So if you have a schema about what women are like, you might think women are X, Y, and Z, or men are X, Y, and Z. And so you'll have this pre-existing thought in your head about what does this thing mean? What are Republicans like versus Democrats? Knowledge provides the raw material for many social judgments. So knowledge also tells us what to expect from our encounters in the world. Prime knowledge, some knowledge is more accessible than other knowledge. Situations themselves can prime certain knowledge, certain thoughts in our heads. In other words, aspects of situations can bring some knowledge more readily to mind. In addition, knowledge may be what we would call chronically accessible. It comes to mind with little encouragement, probably because of the interests of the individual. So if you're really into politics, it's much easier for knowledge about politics to pop into your head in a certain situation than it might be for somebody who has no interest in it. Knowledge helps us to prepare ourselves for encounters in the world by suggesting what we ought to pay attention to, how we should interpret ambiguous situations, and how we ought to behave. And of course, this affects our attitudes, emotions, and moods. So social psychologists consider three types of feelings: attitudes, emotions, and moods. These are the three things we focus on. So attitudes are like favorable or unfavorable evaluations of like a particular person, object, event, idea. Emotions are considered to be richer and more complex and more intense than feelings. In addition to kind of that evaluative component, the positive or negative, emotions also involve a physiological component, meaning that you feel emotions. So, you're angry and your heart rate becomes more intense and your muscles are tense and so on. Moods, on the other hand, are feelings that are less focused but longer lasting than emotions. When we assess our feelings, because feelings are such an important part of social behavior, we really need methods for assessing them. In like experiments, we do self-report measures of feelings, and these can be as simple as asking someone how he or she feels, or asking an individual to rate the strength of his or her feeling on like maybe a 10-point scale. Because people can and really do hide their true feelings, self-report measures may not always be accurate measures of feelings. So behavioral clues is something we look at. They may indicate someone's emotions even if he or she is not asked to share them. And this is not foolproof, of course. People can act in ways that they don't feel, and they can make some efforts to mask their feelings by changing their behaviors, monitoring their behaviors. Physiological measures can also be used to assess feelings. For example, John Gottman is a famous psychologist who works with relationships, and he'll have people get into like an argument with each other, and he monitors their heart rate, how much they sweat. He even has what he calls a wiggleometer, where it's like how much movement. So the more nervous somebody is or the more upset somebody is, the more they move around. So those are physiological measures. Feelings are also, they have a genetic and cultural foundation, so there appears to be genetic and cultural influences on emotions. Individuals the world over express and experience emotions in really pretty remarkably consistent ways. There are, however, clear cultural differences in how those feelings are expressed. Whereas individuals in some cultures are encouraged to express anger, like Arabic cultures, their anger is okay. And encouraged. Individuals in other cultures are taught to suppress it. So individuals in both cultures are feeling anger, but they're taught to do different behaviors with that anger, to express it differently. There's also physiological and cognitive influences on feelings. So genes give us the capability to experience certain emotions, moods, attitudes, and these capabilities are like modified, differentiated, and developed through learning, through cultural processes. Changes in aspect of our physiology, our body, can influence our emotions. Like counterfactual thinking, what might have been type of thinking, that also influences our emotional reactions to like common everyday events. So, knowing that something might have happened differently, that can totally influence how we feel, and how our body reacts too, because our body is part of our emotional feeling experience in life. So why are feelings important? One of the primary functions of feelings is survival. Feelings alert us to changes in the situation that might warrant our attention. Because different unexpected occurrences would warrant like different behavioral responses, we don't experience the same emotion in response to all changes. When we see something like about to attack us, we feel fear, and when we see a loved one about to grab us, we might feel joy. So feelings may have long-term benefits in addition to that sort of situational benefit that we talked about. Positive emotions, for instance, can reduce the physical stress brought on by negative life events. They can extend your lifespan. They can make you less likely to catch the common cold or to get cancer. Okay, so positive and negative effects to emotions. All right, so let's talk about the self in relation to emotions and so on. Individuals have self-related feelings that also influence social behavior. So there is an interaction between the individual and our interaction with other people. People spend a lot of time thinking about themselves or engaging in self-reflection, and that can really change a lot about who we are and our interaction with the world. And this really brings us to the ideas of self-concept and self-esteem. So the knowledge we possess of ourselves is called our self-concept. How we feel or our attitude towards ourselves is called self-esteem. Our self, however, is not just a general view of our who we are. We kind of have multiple selves, such as thoughts about ourselves in the past, and then our current views and our thoughts about who we want to be in the future. Most individuals also possess a collective self, a person who belongs to certain groups. Who am I within my religion, or within as a student, or as a family member? So our self-views come from a variety of sources. Most notably, we come to view ourselves the way we do through three primary paths. The reflected appraisal process is thinking about how we think others view us. Okay. Then we have social comparison, where we compare ourselves to others. And then self-perception process, in which we observe our own behavior and kind of make inferences about ourselves based on those behaviors. So in general, people are motivated to seek feedback that is favorable or self-enhancing, which is why we want friends who are like ourselves, and we want friends who see us how we see ourselves. So we're attracted to people who see us how we see ourselves, whether that's good or bad. So if you have low self-esteem, then you are attracted to people who will encourage that low self-esteem, which is not a great thing. So if you change how you think about yourself, then you will be attracted to, and attracting a whole different class of people. So there are times when people are motivated to seek feedback that is as accurate as possible. Okay, the desire to have like this verifying feedback has been shown to influence who we choose to spend our time with. Okay, who we choose to marry, who's our friends, our associates, the coworkers that we like versus the coworkers we don't like. So people sometimes I'd say most often, they want this verifying feedback where they're seeking the accurate information about themselves. And they also seek from others information that confirms their self-conception, so their self-concept. So this desire to verify what we already believe about ourselves can influence who we like, who we choose to spend time with. All right. So what do I want and how do I get it? So there's a term called self-regulation, where people engage in this process of selecting, monitoring, and adjusting strategies in an attempt to reach goals. So if you want to have this great career, you want to be college educated, you are going to change how you behave in life. You're going to regulate yourself in order to achieve something. So like the best way to keep your children from taking drugs is to give them long-term goals, to encourage them to think about the future and what they want to accomplish in life, because drugs will get in the way of that. So if you have this dream, if you have these goals, you will regulate your behavior in order to meet those long-term goals. So we also will regulate how you're viewed by other people, and this is called self-presentation. So this is our goal to influence how we are seen, how we present ourselves in an attempt to achieve the goals that we want in life. So we engage in self-presentation strategies in an attempt to influence the impressions that others have of us. And we're going to talk more about that in another chapter too. So we'll get into self-presentation in a lot more depth. Okay, so we talked about the person, and now let's talk about the situation. So there are different types of situational influences. There's strong versus weak influences, and individualistic versus collectivistic culture, and these all affect us in our learning, activities, and interactions in life. Through a typical day, we move in and out of many situations. We kind of infuse ourselves into those situations, but it's important to note that situations will also exert influences on us as well. For example, like the layout of a classroom dictates certain classroom behaviors and discourages others. The lighting, noise level, seating arrangements, these all influence what we do in situations. In addition to the physical environment, social aspects of the situation can shape our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Even the mere presence of others influences us. Like the size of your high school can have a significant impact on the person. I went to a high school that had 3,000 students in my graduating class, whereas my niece went to a high school that had 300 students altogether, including middle school. So that's going to have a very different impact on your experience in that situation. So although there are often greater opportunities at large schools, research shows that students from small schools participate in more activities, they have more opportunities for leadership, they take on more challenges, they have better friendships, more tight-knit friendships that last longer. So in addition to like the number of other people present, the particular person present, so you can influence your presence in a situation could influence another person, versus if somebody else was there, that person would have a very different influence. So if I'm teaching versus a substitute is teaching, that's going to influence you differently. All right, so different people provide us with different opportunities, and this is what we call affordances. Let's talk about descriptive norms. Okay, so others in social situations influence us by communicating descriptive norms. So norms that define what is commonly done in a particular situation. Descriptive norms can help us make the right choices and be more successful in situations. However, the same norms can cause us to make mistakes. So like a situation in which a group of people misperceive the beliefs of others because everyone acts inconsistently with their beliefs, that's described as pluralistic ignorance. So for instance, if you were part of a cult, people would be acting on pluralistic ignorance. They all have these same beliefs, but they're misperceiving the beliefs of like the people outside of the cult. So if you're in a cult, you're taught everybody outside of the cult is trying to destroy your spiritual self, and they're trying to lead you astray, or they're trying to hurt you in some way. And so you kind of have this phobia of people outside of the cult. And that is a misperception of what's actually going on, where the truth is like your family's super concerned about you and scared for you, and they just want to help you and want to make sure that you are living the best life possible. But that's not what you believe, and that's not what the people in your group believe. So they have pluralistic ignorance. And that is a type of descriptive norm whereas in a different situation, looking towards how the group is behaving might give you an understanding of how you should act. So that's why, like, you know, when it's a new activity, you want other people to go first because you want to see what's expected. That's the descriptive norm. So these people help you to understand how to behave in that situation. But if they are telling you the wrong behavior, that's pluralistic ignorance, which is hard to say. All right, let's talk about rules more. So we have something called injunctive norms and scripted situations. Many situations have rules that tell us what we're allowed to do or not do, and these rules are called injunctive norms. Whereas descriptive norms tell us what people typically do, injunctive norms tell us what people should do. So the more injunctive norms that are relevant in a given situation, the more scripted that situation will be, because that's what you should do. In scripted situations, certain events are expected to occur like in a particular sequence, like a ritual. Together, injunctive norms and scripts guide people toward appropriate and expected behavior, although again, that could get you in trouble if it is a bad script, if it's bad injunctive norms. And every culture has those. And some are good, some are very helpful, and then there's also some bad ones. So some situations are stronger than others. In other words, some situations have stronger injunctive norms and are more scripted than others. For example, like a funeral places very strong behavioral demands on people, stronger than a nightclub, for instance. So strong situations also afford what we think of as fewer threats than a weak situation. So the more freedom there is in the situation, the more threats there are, the more room there is for people to make mistakes. But the more freedom you have in a situation, the more opportunities there are for good things as well. So you can make more mistakes, but you also have more freedom of choice, more creativity. Weak situations afford a relatively wide range of opportunities as well as threats. So they're characterized by a lack of clear descriptive norms, and they communicate few injunctive norms. So what people normally do, or what people should be doing. If you are an introvert, then you like descriptive and injunctive norms. You want to know what people are doing, you want to know what you should be doing, and to not have injunctive norms kind of freaks you out. That's what you don't like about parties, is a party is a weak situation. So if you knew exactly what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to behave, that's great for an introvert, but an extrovert hates an extrovert hates strong situations because you want that freedom. You want to be able to do whatever comes to you. But yeah, us introverts, we're not so good at that. All right, so culture. What we do is heavily influenced by our culture. And if you've done a lot of traveling like I have, then you would know how much culture influences us. And by the way, our American culture is a very strong culture. It influences us heavily, but you just don't notice it. Go travel to another country and you will see how influenced we are and how strong our American culture is. We do have a culture. It's such a part of us that we don't even think we have a culture. So we are an individualistic culture, and I can't speak today. Individualistic cultures are those that socialize members to think of themselves as individuals and to give priority to their personal goals and what they want to do in life. So they place very different demands on citizens than collectivistic cultures, which are ones that socialize members to think of themselves as members of the larger group and to place the group concerns before their own. So I'm sure you learned about this in Psych 101, so I won't get into it too much, but like an individualistic culture supports the individual, creativity, uniqueness, whereas collectivistic cultures support the family, the group, harmony. So people get along better, but if you are a different person, if you're unique and creative, then it's very hard for you to survive in that culture and to be your own unique person. So it's Japan has a saying that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So yeah, so it's hard to be a unique, different type of person there, whereas that's really valued in individualistic cultures. The more unique and different and stand out you are, the better. So members in these cultures tend to have different types of choices that they make. So individualistic cultures they afford great opportunities for people to exert their independence and to have personal control of their life. So members in these cultures tend to have many choices versus a collectivistic culture. However, collectivistic tend to have stronger families. They get together, they get along better, and so on. So culture has its norms. Members from collectivistic cultures are more likely than those from individualistic cultures to like adjust their behaviors to fit the behaviors of others, to have that harmony. So these cultural differences they're also reflected in how norms are enforced. So collectivistic cultures tend to have more clearly defined scripts for social situations than do individualistic cultures. And cultural scripts, it's possible that social scripts are more pervasive and more strongly enforced in some cultures than others. They're not possible, I mean it is. So even when cultures script the same events, their contents may differ considerably. Like think of a funeral, how they're celebrated differently in different cultures. So the person in this situation strongly interact. And we call these person-situation interactions. Okay, so the situation influences you, you influence the situation. Having said that, different persons respond differently to the same situation. So the person-situation interactions of this sort can occur because different people are attuned to different parts of a situation, or because the same situation means something different to different people. So the term person-situation fit refers to the extent to which a person and situation are compatible. Situations sometimes choose the person, so some situations select certain persons. For example, college admission committees would look for students with certain qualifications. Most jobs have expected qualifications that make like some individuals more competitive for those jobs than others. So that's one example of a person-situation interaction, or the fit or lack of, therefore, of, maybe they don't fit. And then of course people also choose their situations. So like when considering what to do on Saturday night, you don't have anything to do, you're trying to figure out what to do, different people might choose to do different things. So one person might choose a movie while someone else decides to go to a crowded nightclub, or maybe you're just gonna stay home and watch Netflix. So people choose situations based on the opportunities that those opportunities provide. Okay, so what's the benefit of doing that for you, for your personality? And different situations also prime different parts of the person. For example, we may perceive others' actions towards us differently depending on what frame of mind we're in, whether we're in a good mood or a bad mood. So that's how the emotions come back into it. And then, of course, people also change the situation that they are in. So sometimes people change the situations to like increase their chances of achieving their goals. Other times they might influence the situations inadvertently. They're not meaning to do that. And the situation itself can change the person. So sometimes situations can change the person in even dramatic ways, like socialization, where, you know, it's the process by which a culture teaches its members about its beliefs, customs, habits, language. And clearly socialization will change a person. Cultural norms that are, you know, reflected in the institutions, policies, even the laws of a country all require change. Okay, so so we have culture. Culture's influencing the person. I don't know, why is this focusing on the globe? There we go. Okay. The person's influencing the culture, or the situation. And it's like the Stanford prison experiment, right? Where Zimbardo made certain students a prison guard versus the prisoners. So that situation took people who would never behave in an abusive way and made them abusers. Okay, but the people could have also changed the situation, and the prisoners tried to. They rioted, they protested, and they did many things to change the situation. So it's working in all different ways. It's a very systemic sort of multi-directional influence to changing you, changing the situation changing you, etc. Okay, it goes on and on and on.